The Honourable Member for Western Ottawa.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I am pleased to rise today to speak on our Opposition Day motion. And I'd like to also indicate to you that I am sharing my time with the member from New Westminster, Burnaby, New Westminster, to be precise. And I'm sure that he will have much to add to this debate, and in his inimitable fashion, as always, as our international trade critic, understanding the issues that are facing Canadians at home as well. Madam Speaker, for me to stand up and speak about consumer debt and credit cards I'd like to put it in context first of myself. I have to admit, Madam Speaker, that I've never had any personal debt throughout my whole life. I always operated on the positive side of the ledger, and that in later life, when I did finally get a credit card, I always operated that, where I made sure that the payments were made in time, that interest was not accrued on them. And my wife was very diligent in ensuring that happened. And I want to thank her here today, because her hard work in ensuring that our family remained out of the reach of overdue debt, or any debt at all, has made it possible for me to look forward to a good life in my retirement. That's a message I want to deliver to all Canadians, that what we've seen in this country and in this world has been an explosion of debt over the last 25 years that has driven the economies of many countries into rack and ruin. But it also has driven consumers, people, Canadians, others throughout the world, into great hardship. And yes, there's problems of financial literacy, as my honourable member from the Conservative Party pointed out in the last speech here, but there's a far more important issue, and I think that's why, you know, the New Democratic Party can look south of the border right now with some degree of confidence when we hear the new President of the United States, the new administration, with new ideas, talking about what's needed to bring the American economy around. And that's why we can look there and say, do they have good ideas that we can pick up on? Do people in the United States have ideas within their administration or within their Congress that in Canada we can take advantage of? In fact, in some instances, we are probably able to move more quickly than the United States in putting forward legislation here to change, more likely to, in the future, offer up solutions to the United States. And that is something that, you know, in the economy that exists now in North America, we have to understand is very integrated. So for us to look and take ideas from other legislators in this grand continent, I don't think is inappropriate. We're going to be seeing more of that in the future from the New Democratic Party, because the President of the United States sounds more like a New Democrat than I've heard from anyone down there before. So we've got somebody there in the United States that we can count on to provide us with advice as well. We don't have a George Bush there anymore, whose policies and directions were totally repugnant to the New Democratic Party and to most of Canadians and to our supporters across the country. This is a different time, Madam Speaker, and we have the opportunity to pick up. New Democratic Party is right now the mainstream of economic reason in this country.
Hear, hear.
You know, I had the opportunity the other day to speak with John Rodriguez, who was the financial institutions critic for the New Democratic Party in the 80s. And what did he say? We fought long and hard against the Conservatives and the Liberals to ensure that the banks in Canada did not expand their scope beyond what needed to be, that our financial institutions were kept in line. And that work is playing out today. So for the party across, or the Liberals, to call us Luddites is nonsense. We've been standing up for Canadians in this Parliament, for financial security, for all the time that our members have been here, whether there's 5 members or 30 members. we stand up for Canadians and ensure that their interests are first and their interests are protected. And that's what we're doing here today, Madam Speaker, with this introduction of this motion from the honourable member from Sudbury. This is not a in this time, when we look to the future for what people need in this country, do we need our consumers continuing their path of greater and greater consumer debt in this country? No, we don't. We don't need that. That's not good for Canadians. That's not going to work for Canadians. The fallacy of the extension of debt among consumers in Canada has come home to roost and was apparent to every individual in this country. So why doesn't the Conservative Party recognize that the importance of these issues to consumers and to Canadians is paramount? And I really want to congratulate the member for bringing this motion forward. We need to bring sense back into Canadians' lives. We need to take the institutions that provide them with financial resources and make them understand that their job is to ensure that their customers are well protected with their financial dealings with those companies. The concept of a bank as being a secure and good place to get financial advice, to understand how to use credit, to ensure that the people that run the bank have the concern of their customers first, is a concept that I think we have to go back to and that we have to understand should drive the economy once we come out of this recession. We don't want to go back 2 years from now and consider that nothing was really wrong with what we were doing. Nothing was wrong with the extension of consumer debt to a point where there was no savings left in this country. There was no security for individuals in what they were doing with their money. We want to change that and move forward so that Canadians will progress, that they will gain after this downturn is over, so that they will have a new economy that will be less reliant on their personal suffering and more on a system that delivers them the resources they require, that can make their lives work, and that they can afford to use in their day-to-day practices. Madam Speaker, to talk about consumer debt and credit cards and to understand the nature of what is happening with this system, I think is, for some of us, very difficult. Of course it is. But it's not difficult to understand when someone pays their credit card down at the end of the month and misses $10 and ends up paying on the whole amount. We understand how usurious that is. That doesn't take a degree in economics to understand that that's not fair. So that's one of the things that we're working on here. To limit abusive fees and penalties, to ensure that credit card holders understand the terms and conditions of their contracts, and the terms and conditions of their contracts work for them as well. That's the job of the regulatory agency, the government of this country, to provide that assurance to consumers that what is offered as a basic method of payment of so many different products in this country has the terms and conditions that can work for both the consumer and for the lender. So, Madam Speaker, I think what we're working with here is a good resolution. It has many parts to it. It's something that Parliament should take hold of, should work for. This government cannot simply increase the font on the back of the credit card application form as their step towards ensuring the health and well-being of Canadians' financial future. That's not good enough. We need to understand where we want to go in this country with credit. We need to understand that that credit can be just as much a problem as alcohol or drugs. We need to understand that We need to protect our consumers in the long term from what has happened to them. And that has not been the case for the past 20 years. That's why we're in the situation we are in today. We need to change and we need to move forward. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments? Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Mississauga, Szabo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank the member for adding to the consensus that there is a problem and there's things to do. Madam Speaker, I've often said in this place that for every complex problem there is a simple solution, and it's wrong. What has been proposed today in this motion, the Liberals and Bloc will be supporting the NDP motion. It appears that the government, according to the member for Burlington, the motion makes no sense to either him or his Conservative colleagues. So, but the member does raise a point that we do have a problem, and it is a problem that is a today problem. We don't need a task force to study, like the Conservatives are saying. We have to have a task force to study the problem, and then we're going to start helping them. What we need to do, and I think, and I hope the member would comment, is we have to reach out now too. There's money in the budget. There's an opportunity for the government to communicate today, not 6 months from today, not a year from today, but today, on how consumers can get the help that they need to get the process started to stop the problem. They need some assistance, and I know that within a matter of months, Madam Speaker, there will be a lot of families that are going to lose everything they have. And that is the tragedy. We can't be seen to be just sitting here talking about doing studies and task force and maybe we'll have a bill and deal with this. We really need to communicate with consumers now. I wonder if the member agrees.
The Honourable Member for Western Arctic.
Well, Madam Speaker, I agree with the urgency of the problem. And this goes back to the previous budget that came out and my major problems with it. There was no vision for the future. There was no acknowledgement of the problem. The only one that's provided leadership on acknowledgement of the problem has been Obama. President Obama standing up and saying the greed has driven us to where we're at. You know, we need those kinds of declarations here. We need to give Canadians the understanding where the problems come from first. We do need to have solutions that can stand up for Canadians in the short term. But we have to as well have a vision of where we want this country to go after the recession is over. How we can recover from the recession and how we can move over with an economy that works for Canadians in a new and better fashion.
Comments, the Honourable Member for Windsor West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What's important to know is the Canadian Federation of Independent Business said this, quote, "Our members are being confronted with uncontrollable cost increases from credit card companies with seemingly little or no warning, with economic conditions already tight and many of our members facing difficult financial conditions. They will be forced to pass this added cost onto the consumer at the worst possible time for the Canadian economy." The Retail Council of Canada said the stakes are high and Canadians are looking for decisive government action that will rein in runaway fees charged to merchants who have no choice but to pass along these out-of-control costs to consumers in the form of higher prices. Now, what's interesting, I'd like to ask my colleague, is why do the Conservatives feel that the Retail Council of Canada and the Canadian Federation of Independent Business have it wrong? These represent organizations, businesses small and large, most of them small, but also consumer groups that are out there. And why is it our Conservative colleagues feel that they have it so wrong too? It seems that the only people that have it right are the Conservatives. And maybe it goes back to the fact the matter is in 1990, Brian Mulroney rejected capping that, and they're just trying to protect their flank again at the expense of Canadians.
The Member for Western Arctic has a minute to respond.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I think, Madam Speaker, it goes back to a question of ideology, and we heard the speech from the Honourable Member from Burlington. He talked about the necessity of people actually, they're responsible for their own future. That's their mentality. They want to cast people out into the sea of sharks and let them swim. You know, maybe you could take along a survival document when you go into that sea of sharks, but that's about all you're going to get. You're going to get a website, you know, and that's going to protect you from the sharks. Well, that's not what we need. We need some decent work here in Parliament.